think we're gonna go ahead and kick this off. So, hello everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in today. My name is Leslie DeLay, and I'm currently a presidential ambassador, and I'm dual majoring in biomedical and mechanical engineering at Colorado State University.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm Camila Podominic. I'm also a presidential ambassador, and I'm a chemical and biological major with minors in science and technical and science communication, and also food science and safety. And we are joined today by our two great alumni, BJ Lopez and Taylor Hutching. So BJ received his bachelor's in mechanical engineering in 2000, and Taylor received her bachelor's in mechanical engineering also in 2018. So thank you so much, both of you, for for lending us your very precious time.
Thank you.
The Career Connections Engineering Enterprise session today continues a series of live interviews we will be producing with our alumni and friends of the university in a variety of fields. We hope our students and alumni are able to use these informational interview videos as learning tools when deciding on their desired career path or when learning about a new industry. If you're interested in connecting for further mentorship after today's interview, we will have avenues to do so as well.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. BJ and Taylor, again, thank you so much for joining us today. So first, I would like to start just asking you to share a little bit with our alumni students who joined us here today. Just please share a little bit of your pathway. How did you go from your major at CSU, your engineering major, to where you are today? And if you can talk a little bit about where you are today too, that would be great.
Go ahead, Taylor, you start.
Okay, well, thank you. My name is Taylor Hutchin, and like Camila said, I graduated in 2018 with a degree in mechanical engineering. I currently work at Otter Products, and under Otter Products, specifically at OtterBox. I'm a mechanical engineer, and my day-to-day is focused on designing cases and leading a small team for the Symmetry series, which is like our stylish, slim cases. My pathway to get to Otter was largely focused around my senior design project at CSU. So, I mean, going farther back, I first got introduced to engineering back in high school. I grew up in Arvada, Colorado, and was fortunate enough to go to a high school that had offered engineering elective courses. So I signed up for those my freshman year, and we've largely focused on like designing, taking our designs and applying those in real life applications, creating like trebuchets, reverse engineering, all that good stuff. So that really piqued my interest in engineering. And from there, went to CSU, focusing on mechanical engineering because I didn't really know what the other engineering disciplines did. And I thought that mechanical was the closest to what I had already been doing. You know, once in school, I kind of struggled a little bit in my coursework. In high school, I was a 4.0 student, straight A's, did like really well on tests. When I got to college, I had a little bit of a reality check. Things were a little bit more difficult. So I vividly remember like freshman year failing a couple of courses and calling my dad up like, Dad, I don't know if engineering is for me. I think I want to be a math teacher or something instead. But he encouraged me to continue on with my studies. I ended up doing a 5-year plan so that I could focus on my studies a little bit more and really be able to like nail down my interest in engineering. So once I kind of got past those rough courses, going into my 5th year of school, I got an internship offer to do HVAC work and project management work for a company in Seattle. So I moved out to Seattle for a summer, worked as a project manager, and fell in love with that aspect of engineering and was like 100% certain that was what I was going to do once I graduated. So I went back into my senior year, signed up to be the project manager of my senior design course group, and started working with OtterBox. And even though I felt disconnected a little bit from engineering and I knew I was going to go project management route, working with Otter, I was really encouraged by the engineers there and by the things that they got to work on, designing cases, coming up with new technologies. And so I worked really hard in that team and ended up getting an offer from the company a couple months into my senior design coursework, and ended up accepting the offer, and now I've been there for 2.5 years. But my experience with them during senior design really kind of like reconnected me with what made me fall in love with engineering in high school, and I do not regret my career path at all. I'm so happy where I'm at today.
Thank
That's
you,
great. Should I
Jane.
take over? Yeah.
Yes, please.
That sounds great. Yeah. I started, back in the 90s. I graduated in high school in 95. So I had an interest in becoming an astronaut. That didn't really, I think when I realized what you had to actually do to do that, I kind of said, maybe there's something, there's something different. But I did really enjoy the math and sciences, learning physics, and kind of really seeing how the physical sciences could be described by mathematics, and that combination really turned into, I think, what we know of is engineering today. So going through that, I was pretty sure, being mechanically inclined, didn't have, I tinkered around with a lot of electrical stuff, but mostly just short circuits and stupid things like that. So figured, I liked the mechanical side. I liked to fix things. I liked working with machines. So I went into, at CSU, I went into mechanical engineering, got my degree with a bachelor's in science in mechanical. But I think some of the parts about really getting ingrained into the mechanical world was that with the Engines and Energy Conversion Laboratory with Dr. Wilson. The kinds of things we learned there, from trade skills like machining, welding, and some of the other disciplines that sort of are at the downstream side of engineering. And then as we learned our discipline, we were able to apply more mathematics to that, some of the stresses and all the things that go into saying, like, is this thing going to fail? Is it going to work? We were able to apply some of that as we worked through, and then building into our senior design project was just pretty neat. We did the Clean Snowmobile Challenge, which was a first of its kind at the time, making a low emissions, low smoke, clean snowmobile that could the technology behind that. So we put some fun time into that, a lot of hours, and it was really neat to be able to see these large engines, which were funded by natural gas research and development and diesel research and development by Caterpillar, and to see all those work. So a lot of that, kind of leading up to finally like my senior year in college, where there was tons of instrumentation, controls, the electronic pieces started to fall into place there, and understanding how the disciplines interplay with each other if you choose paths in those areas where you can see how the electronics plays into the control world, and then the control ties into instrumentation. The instrumentation controls the mechanical sides of it, which was a really good inroads into my career path at Woodward, where they needed a fluid systems technician starting. Even though I was an engineer, they had a pipeline career path where you could basically go in as a lab engineer and you start to design the test equipment and the test protocols around the development products that were coming down the line from our engineering groups themselves. So that was a pretty neat inroads. And then from there, career path, tons of stuff to talk about there, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. But that's kind of my basic background all the way up until about 2000s, where I got into fluid system and controls, and a lot of the stuff you learn in the books. Woodward's got tons of that stuff in practice, which is pretty neat.
This is great. Thank you so much. It's very interesting to hear. I mean, in Northfield is very 20 years apart. I mean, from 2000 to 2020, there is so much difference in technology. So thank you for touching on that. And if anyone has any question about something, like you want to learn more about something that BJ or Taylor said during their openings, please feel free to ask in the chat, and we will bring those questions to them as we go.
Awesome. Yeah, just bouncing off what Camilla said, thank you guys both so much for sharing. After hearing about your career path and what you're doing now, I just want to ask if there's anything you guys would have done differently, knowing what you do know now. Yeah, just anything you would have liked to know.
I think for me, thinking back to myself, like my freshman and sophomore year when I was busy beating myself up over grades and stuff, I really think I wish I would have given myself a lot more grace and like trusted my abilities and kind of identified my strengths and weaknesses and learned to work on developing those sooner. So I guess for the maybe the younger students or young alumni, just like trust your gut, trust your ability. Nobody knows you quite like you do, and just like yeah, continue to work on yourself, and it'll all work out in the end.
Yeah, I started writing a list. I'm not sure how I can kind of breeze through a couple of these, but I think some of the stuff if you're talking mostly about entering the career pathways is I think the one thing I've really learned is that you don't really truly know where you're going to be or where you're going to go in 5 years necessarily. That's an important thing to set some goals, but at the same time, don't punish yourself for not necessarily meeting that exact goal. I think the idea behind it, in my experience, has been more to set a direction and then just achieve as you go along with some amount of measure of success, knowing that you're going down the right financial pathway that you feel is comfortable for your lifestyle. You have the right work-life balance behind what you're doing and why you're doing it. I think it's so important to understand why you're in the career that you're in. You don't always have choices to choose where you go within a company, but you do have the choice at least to apply for the different types of companies. So company culture has been an interesting, you might say, a philosophical kind of discussions I have with people around, how do you choose the right culture? Well, sometimes you don't. You choose the company first, and then you try to find if that culture fits with you. If it really doesn't, meshing that with the kind of the purpose behind why you're in the career that you're doing, and if it's just not making any sense, then try to move on as best you can. It doesn't always work right away. You got to be patient and figure out how to assess that long term, in midterm, short term, just kind of set those things forward for yourself. But again, don't punish yourself for saying I didn't become the exact engineer I thought I was going to be in school. I just wholeheartedly believe that's a good way to just make yourself feel bad as you go through life.
Can I add something onto that as well?
Absolutely.
I would say I've worked with a lot of engineers who have had pivots in their career path as well. Like they thought they were going to go one direction, ended up going a totally different direction. And so I think people being like willing to be flexible and open to opportunities is also really important. Embracing those like career pivots, you can also oftentimes like learn a lot from those experiences and opportunities you've received without even kind of thinking about it. So I would just say embrace pivots if possible and be flexible.
Yeah, there's a couple other things that kind of come to mind too, that I can't stress enough how much the 401k thing is. As you do get into a profession, I know you want to go buy that big fancy sports car and all that kind of stuff as you start making money, but it is really important to keep your finances healthy, that you are working towards, you're not necessarily working just to be retired, but as you do get older, if you get into your 40s and 50s and find out you just didn't save enough money, it's going to be a painful way. I know the challenges you guys have today with how costly school is. That's got to be a tough one to handle, but balance that as best you can. Try to get as much money into the 401k realm, thinking of that long-term planning, but at the same time still trying to balance that with how you want to live today.
Those were really good. I mean, mainly for us too, because we are young engineers too, right, Leslie? So, but yeah, thank you so much for those encouraging words. And yeah, it is important. I mean, when we all start college, we become, we change too as people as we go. So it's really important to be kind to yourself and graceful to yourself, because you are also changing, right? So thank you so much for those words and those advice.
Yes, and going off of that, we have a handful of questions that people were able to send us before we hopped on the call. But just a reminder to any attendees, we just invite you to continue putting any questions in the chat that we can answer after and as they pop up through discussion. So our first question was from an attendee who was wondering if some of the lessons on this talk can transition to either re-entering a more true engineering profession after some time away or with more recent experience in data mining oriented field. They're seeking advice on the best ways to obtain remote positions. So I really think this attendee is just asking how they could use their experience to navigate into a true engineering profession, and if you guys have any advice for them.
BJ, do you want to answer or start with that one? I think you might have a little bit more experience.
Well, I didn't quite get if this person was an engineering student already or has an engineering degree or not. It could be difficult to get into an engineering profession without some folks that I work with are computer science majors. They are physics majors. Those types of professions feed well into the work we do, and it brings also some different insights into that. The data mining piece of it, I think you're going to find that engineering will have its components of data mining, but will not be, at least in the areas that I'm working in, as a manufacturer. Data mining probably plays more of a role in areas where there's a lot of continuous improvement activities going on, or some financial work. So that could be tricky, but there's also a lot of companies out there that do, like I think it's global digital and different types of analytical companies where maybe the computer science or engineering backgrounds doesn't necessarily, the degree itself doesn't matter, whether it's more or less whether you know the specific analysis tools or the ability to apply a particular type of programming language to the type of business that they're in. So if they're trying to do imagery data from satellites and are trying to use some sort of AI type of or machine learning, or if it's just strictly some type of data crunching where they're reducing the data into useful data sets that then a computer algorithm could use or people could manage in visual data sets. Visual tools are always very helpful for leaders. They want as much as possible to be able to see what their manufacturing process or their processes in general, the performance of their company look like visually. So that might be an area that you could go and look into.
When I first look at this question, what I had thought of is like data mining is I don't know much about it, but it seems like it's in a pretty technical kind of number crunching type realm. And I think that that's some of the skills you probably have learned in data mining could be transferable to some sort of engineering application. So it's not like going from being like, I don't know, someone in HR and trying to be an engineer. It seems like they're a little bit more married in terms of technological like concepts and stuff like that. So maybe just like build on the skills that you already have and see if there's a way to kind of marry your interests there with something in engineering and kind of figuring out where those play together. On the second question about remote work and telecommuting, I think there's no time like the present to be looking for those jobs. Just because I am working remote right now, like it's a really good opportunity, like in this day and age, to be looking for that. And I have a feeling, I don't know, that this might be the trend going forward for a lot of companies. So I think there's going to be more and more opportunity in the future to like look for those jobs. But yeah.
Yeah, Camilla brought up a point earlier when we were discussing before that I share with her in manufacturing, where it's a brick and mortar kind of industry. You have to have a shop floor. The remote piece of it is going to be difficult. If you think you're going to get into manufacturing, think real hard about where the data mining pieces are coming from versus, say, a software company where you could potentially do everything remotely. So that was a good point, Taylor. didn't mention that.
Thank you so much, guys. So now we're just talking about migrating from one career to another. And I identify with that myself. I was a journalist before migrating to engineering, so there's always those crazy people out there. But yeah, so it seems like we have some physicists joining us today that would like to join the engineering industry. And if you can give this person some maybe tips on how she or he might act differently, you know, from an engineer, is starting like how maybe some tips on how this person could insert himself into the engineering industry, having a physicist major. Doctor.
Go ahead.
One of the things I can think of like right off the bat would be like working on your soft skills. So like the way you communicate, being able to like speak to others, document things well, be organized. I think that that all really served myself well when I was going into an engineering degree. And I know that Otter specifically looks at that for a lot of their engineers. So just kind of really working on those soft skills. In the design realm, we don't necessarily do a lot with physics, but as I was saying earlier on, there's a lot of similarities with engineering and physics. Like there's a reason why we take physics classes in order to get our mechanical engineering degree. So I guess if this person's still in school, maybe I'd encourage them to join like some of the different mechanical engineering groups, start networking or working with people in engineering, try and connect with people in their classes, just kind of like networking. And then from there, just even applying for jobs with engineering in the title, trying to take on internships with that kind of a background. I think just kind of putting yourself out there and trying to show that that's what you're interested in pursuing is really important.
Yeah, you mentioned a really great point, Taylor, about soft skills, which hopefully these days, I think the two things that were not well taught or taught at all when I was going to school was leadership and soft skills. And those were two items I wrote down on my paper here to touch on. I'm glad we are now. There are things that you kind of have to learn yourself, and hopefully you have a good mentor to be able to find how to utilize those skills. From the physics point of view, you know, I'm doing a lot of physical modeling. So the physics folks are really good at that sort of stuff. So like Simulink or simulation type of areas, especially in aircraft and aerospace, which we work very heavily in, including in the areas of design analysis or simulating either for dynamic response or we do a lot of integration with controls. So the physics people, I think, lend their knowledge very well to be able to apply that physics background and those physics mentality to that analytical skill. The side where the physics could maybe be a challenge is if there's a particular discipline that needs a particular skill set that maybe physics has described in the past, but not necessarily taught the practical methods of how to work in the design space and some of the engineering economics pieces of it, like how do I make this design for manufacturing? How do I make it machinable? How is it testable and practical? Is this really what the customer wants? It may meet all the physical properties of physics, but there's all these other spaces you have to be tuned into in order to make the design equitable. So things to consider from a physics point of view.
Thank you guys both for sharing. I think it's encouraging hearing that a lot of companies are also looking for soft skills and leadership, because that seems like something CSU is really emphasizing. And so that's exciting too, that directly applies to a career. Continuing on, there's another attendee that's looking for remote work, which we touched on a little before, but specifically for aerospace engineering position. And they were just wondering if you had suggestions for companies or advice of how to really find companies that would fit well for them.
Yeah, maybe I could take this one right. If you have some input, Taylor, I don't want to cut you off. Being that we are in aerospace and being in aerospace manufacturing, again, emphasizing that the company really needs people to be supporting the development of the products as they go and transition into production and productivity. So again, I think the emphasis is going to be on remote learning is probably going to favor the software world in general, or from an engineering perspective. At least that's my limited insight potentially into that. It doesn't mean that it's a hard fact, but consider the software world. And then also, I imagine if companies are open to it, you can call them and ask them what their policy is on remote learning. Like, are they requiring you to actually go live in San Francisco where it costs an arm and a leg to actually get a job, or commute 2 hours to go into the Bay Area or something like that? Or are they transitioning and moving away from some of that so they can draw talent in and without that big stifling paycheck buster of cost of living? So things to consider there, and just to really discuss that with the future potential employer.
Yeah, I think it's just good to be upfront and, communicate with the place you're looking to work, just figuring out their policies. Is it going to be a good fit? Is it not going to be a good fit? I can only speak for like the design aspect at Otter, and a lot of our design work can be handled like off-site. But yeah, I don't really have much to offer for this question, but I echo what BJ said, and just communicate with the people you're interested in being employed by and kind of dig into what their policies are. Are they flexible with working arrangements? Are they not? Are they more rigid? Knowing that ahead of time is going to probably serve you a lot better than finding out your first day of work.
Yeah, no, I think actually you also added a great point, Taylor, because the design is a huge part of engineering. And then sometimes we just think about the hands-on and then being with those big machines and manufacturing. But yeah, design is a super important part that can be done remotely if that's what the person is looking for. You want to add something, BJ?
No, I think that's pretty well said.
Okay, great. So I'm loving to see how different is the backgrounds of people joining us here today, because I got a question from a person who is studying to be a career counselor. And then this person want to have some advice on what kind of words, what kind of advices she or he should be giving to students who are interested in going into engineering careers. Basically, like, what would you like to have heard when you before you decide to go to engineering?
Let's see. I didn't utilize career counseling as much as I probably should have. I utilized my dad mostly. So, but yeah, I think it would have been for me really helpful in school to kind of just be brought down a level, I guess. Like, I was so hyper focused on getting straight A's, which is not a bad thing at all. But that wasn't going to work for me. So I think someone who would have just kind of like brought down my standards and kind of been more realistic with me, I think would have been a really great approach had I seen a career counselor. I was able to like I said, work through that with my dad, just being like, all right, so 4 years is maybe too much. 18 credits a semester is not going to work for me, but 5 years and 13 credits is going to work for me. And knowing that it's okay to not like completely ace every single class. It's going to be okay. I still ended up just fine, got a job, got internships. So I think I answered that question. But yeah, if they have more questions, feel free to ask.
Yeah, I've been part of a lot of hiring processes through the years. It kind of comes down to if you're being hired for an entry-level position, if you're being hired for a manufacturing position versus a highly analytical job. So the job specifics, I think, are going to play into that, and how your skill set meshes with those. I know there's tons of advice out there that you'll never find one consistent result that says this is exactly how to make the right kind of resume. What I've kind of come down to is that if you have the right information on there, the right training, you've listed the right resources and your skill sets in the right way. I don't personally mind reading through lengthy lengthy resumes. Yeah, mine's 4 pages long. I know they say to try to keep it to 2, but like to fit 20 years worth of experience into 2 pages just seems kind of ridiculous. But you know, if you got the skill set, put it out there. Design notebooks, I think, are huge. For someone to just tell me that they know how to do something versus show me, the visualization of that goes a long way. So people that can bring in the data, either have it printed out and show what they've done in the past, show how they understand your business to some extent. So if you look at Woodward and being aerospace and industrial, control mechanisms and that sort of stuff, we have tons and tons of regulation that we have to meet. So if somebody can come in and talk about how they know how certain parts of the FAA work, or certain qualifications and certifications that are relevant to flight certs or to industrial compliance for safety and hazardous locations, those sorts of things, that goes a long ways. And then you know, being able to at least being able to show and display on paper as much as possible that you understand the design world, you understand the engineering world, where you're communicating in potentially the same language that the people that are receiving the information speak. So I know that's difficult to do if you don't necessarily have a lot of background in that particular field, but try to tailoring that information to the company as best as possible. Any more specifics on that, I'd be happy to answer.
I was going to add as well, you said this was someone who's looking to be a career counselor for engineers?
Yes.
Okay, so I think something else that could be beneficial for this individual is like familiarizing themselves with each of the different engineering disciplines, like civil, mechanical, systems, like the full list, and kind of making like maybe a cheat sheet of what each of those do and different career paths you can take in each of those different disciplines would be super helpful. So if like a student or somebody came in was like, here's what my interests are, but I don't know where like my interests lie within engineering, it'd be, I think, really helpful for this individual to have like a quick reference sheet or go-to guide of like, oh, your interests really seem to align with electrical engineering, so let's have you try out a class next semester in that. Or oh, you really actually look like you would fit well with mechanical, and maybe let's have you join this different group. So I think for someone going into this like kind of a career counseling role, just knowing what the disciplines do, different aspects of those disciplines, and how people's interests might align in there would be really, really helpful.
Yeah, that's a really, really important point. And we can also remind this person, I mean, there's so many different types of engineering coming out every day, right? We have some colleges that now have specific food engineering bachelors. And we also have a very general, we have engineering sciences, if it's a person who is still, know that they want to be an engineer, still exploring. So yeah, that's a very good point. Like just informing yourself about the engineerings out there, and then where the student can attend those classes. So thank you so much, guys.
I also wanted to add, I really appreciate the 2 different perspectives, Taylor and BJ, that you gave. Taylor, I feel like you gave a good perspective about what to be looking for as a student and what you're doing right now in the day-to-day. I'm a lot like you. I sometimes need to be reminded that it's okay to not get A's on every test, because real world experience and life experience is also important. And BJ, just how to really prepare for those interviews and seeking out different companies. So that was really helpful. Thank you guys. And kind of feeding off that same question, we've had a lot of questions just with what is the importance of getting a master's degree in engineering, and is that beneficial? Is that something you guys recommend? So.
Good. Yeah.
I personally don't plan on getting my master's degree, and I also didn't take the FE. So that's just my own perspective. But I think if someone was interested in pursuing like a master's degree in mechanical engineering, it just makes you more competitive. Those extra years of schooling show that you have like developed but different types of problem solving skills and different analytical approaches that maybe you weren't experienced or exposed to in your undergraduate studies. So I think overall, it just kind of like adds an extra boost to your name on your resume, which is always helpful. I would imagine that there's probably some industries that you would get into, maybe like biomedical or something along those lines, where having just that little extra boost in your academics would help distinguish you from the next person and might also kind of be a requirement.
Yeah, those are great points. The concentration of work that goes into a master's can play really well into a specific area. So say, like I think maybe to tie it back to earlier in the conversation about a physics person, maybe going and getting an engineering master's, I think maybe that would be a really good cross of the two. If, you know, there's a couple other disciplines that I've been working through, and especially in the systems engineering discipline, which is really multidisciplinary. So it's where you have the ability to go and pick up a lot of different areas of expertise. And if you have that good fortune to be able to move around the company or work with people that have that particular type of those backgrounds and those disciplines, and then you attach yourself to you attach yourself to a discipline where you can start to recognize the patterns between how these disciplines interact from a design perspective. That's really the foundation of systems engineering. And really system engineering comes down to really managing complexity. And as we get into aerospace and very complex machinery and systems, including AI, which is, it's not just restricted to just the physical and software, but it goes into like machine learning, and the complexities that go into these large scale endeavors requires a level of skill sets that is beyond disciplines. So I think system engineering is a great path if you can find inroads or some way to get yourself educated into multi-disciplines. It's a really good way to tie together. It's also a method of thinking that isn't necessarily attributed just to engineering. So the word engineering in itself in system engineering can be a little bit misleading, where if you can actually tie systems together that are actually business systems or they're social systems. So the study of system engineering isn't strictly tied to the technical world of engineering. It's really the understanding of systems in general. So I think that's a really interesting way to go from a master's perspective. But if you really feel like you want to get some very, very in-depth knowledge around a particular area of engineering, like mechanical or electrical, certainly feel free to do that. I think Taylor made the good point of, yeah, you'll distinguish yourself for sure on a resume. I haven't seen it play out as well for people getting a master's while they're in the company. There's no guarantee for advancement just because you took the time. The company does pay for certain schools to go to, so that's something to consider if you're looking for a career at a company and maybe you haven't decided whether you want to get your master's yet, but maybe this company supports assisted tuition program. So we call that TAP at our company, but they will pay for a lot of companies will pay for your tuition to get that master's degree. And different companies are going to have different policies on after you've gotten that degree, what your career path looks like after that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, it's always important. Like that's something that a student, senior, or someone who is about to graduate is interested in. It's definitely something very valid to ask in an interview. Like the company offers that kind of benefit because many of them do. And yeah, if you want to get deep, that's a really good advice. Having that master's degree will definitely make you stand out. Once many engineers like Taylor and like me, for example, do not intend on going into a master's program right away. So thank you so much, you guys, for that. And Taylor, seems like you are also receiving the questions because someone also asked about the fundamentals of engineering exam. So if you guys can talk about how important how important you believe it is to maybe pass the fundamentals of engineering exam. Maybe you can even actually explain what the FE exam is in case someone here is wondering. And Yeah, I think the person wants to know more, like if it's a post-graduation, how important it is for entry-level positions to have that FE, I passed FE step on your resume.
I can speak for Otter in that a lot of my coworkers don't have it. There are some that did pursue it though and did take it in past. I don't think it's like one of the criteria that we're currently looking for in an engineer of like, did they pass their FE? I'd be interested to hear more what BJ says about it, but like for me personally, I just see myself in my career not necessarily needing it. Oh, and I guess to sum up too, the FE is like an exam you take after you graduate. I think you can still take it while you're in school as well, but it's basically like kind of the test of all tests to cover pretty much everything you've learned in engineering over the course of your 4 years. And if you pass, you get like a EIT certificate, so engineer and training certificate. It's an extra differentiator, I'd say similar to a master's degree. In my case, I just personally didn't take it and Otter didn't require it. And long term, I think that I kind of see myself either being like manager or going to project management route. So not like a super highly technical position in the future. And so I didn't necessarily think for me that it was the right choice to take it.
Yeah, I took that probably 22 years ago, so I'm not quite sure where it sits today in how employers view it. It certainly won't hurt. And my intuition tells me that the larger, especially working with larger companies in general through most of my career, the larger companies have very few certified engineers, so you don't see the requirement for stamping approvals like you might see in smaller like architectural firms, and compliance for state regulation or building code kind of things. So civil might have more need for that potentially, or certain mechanical disciplines potentially, or electrical disciplines where maybe there's a form of infrastructure that requires the professional engineer to sign a particular set of documents. Corporations, I think like ours, fall under a different category legally, as far as I know. Don't quote me on this, but there are some ways that larger companies with the right processes and ISO certifications allow, like we have we have FAA certifications and certain to basically get past some of that professional engineer sign off type of work. So it's only been once in my career where I've ever had to have a PE sign a document, and that was for a very, very specific reason for a very specific customer, and there wasn't much to it. He just put a stamp on my work. So yeah, something to consider maybe with smaller businesses or different disciplines. You might have to research into that a little bit.
Yeah, may I ask you one of you to please differentiate, because there is the PE and the FE exams, right? There are two different exams. So like if any of you can please explain the difference, because I think, Vijay, you were talking about the PE, right? Mm-hmm. That you actually have.
Yeah, and the FE is the precursor to what Taylor mentioned as the EIT, which is engineering training. I think if my memory serves correctly, you had 4 years of engineering and training under a PE, and then you can take the PE. You're qualified to take the PE exam. Then you still have to go through all the discipline of studying for that and passing that to get your PE stamp. And then I think you also have to keep it up to date. So you can't just have it forever. So
yeah,
anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll say in my experience, it's at least what I've noticed, and I'm engaged to a civil engineer, but it's really important for them to have their eventual PE. So the FE is really important to that discipline. I can't speak to like electrical or anything along those lines, but at least for myself, I wasn't even going to have the opportunity to work under a PE at Otter, so it seemed silly to me. But yeah, BJ nailed it with the PE FE distinguisher. Like, take your FE first right after graduation, and then in 4 years after working under someone with a stamp and with the PE, then you can go ahead and take your test and get your stamp as well. So
Yeah, and also I would just want to add that a lot of companies that offer consulting, that are engineering consultants, they require their engineers to have PE exactly because of that, because companies come to them with these projects and they do require someone with that PE certificate to stamp their project so they can move on. So if you're thinking about going to that route to the consulting world, that's definitely something we should be looking into. So thank you so much, guys, for answering that.
Yeah, thank you guys. I have a lot of conversation around the FE and PE within mechanical engineering with my fellow classmates. So it's interesting hearing more perspectives once you're now in your career. And then we did have another question come through in the chat, and they just asked, have either of you experienced imposter syndrome, and what did you do to overcome it?
I'm going to need to Google that.
Yep, that's what I was just about to say. I think I need to Google that real fast and then I can get back to you.
Can you describe what that means, imposter syndrome?
So it's basically like when you believe that you are in this one position. And I can say that I felt that a lot, mainly like coming from journalism, being in amongst people who always knew they wanted to be engineers. So it's just basically like, the way that I experienced imposter syndrome is like, oh, I'm not smart enough. I shouldn't be here. Like, this is not, you know, it's something that Taylor had touched about before. So it's basically, the way that I experienced that is really being like, this is like, I don't know enough. Basically, like, you don't know enough, that everyone knows more than you, and you don't know what you're doing. So that's something that I have experienced a lot. So if you can pitch in and tell your experiences.
I would say in college, I probably experienced that like on a weekly basis. I was like, am I meant to be here? Is this the career path that I want to be on? Did I choose the right path? And it took a lot of like believing in myself and learning to trust myself and learning to like cater to my strengths and build on my weaknesses, and to really realize that, yeah, I'm okay with doing this and I'm meant to be here and I'm just as smart as the rest. I just need to trust my gut, trust what I know, and also just be willing to learn. Like, I think that that's the big part of it, is like having confidence in yourself and being like, yeah, maybe I don't know everything that the people here do, but I'm sure as heck willing to learn and get up to speed. So I think that that's kind of, for me, what's been a really good way to combat like not feeling like I belong somewhere, is just like a willingness to learn, acknowledge that maybe I don't know as much, and then build on that from there. And also just being confident in yourself. I think that that's really important, and it's definitely easier said than done.
Sure. Yeah, there's kind of two realities. There's the reality that you don't know everything that everybody else knows, and that you don't think you know what everybody else knows, and they can both be true at the same time. The idea behind it, I think, from a sort of a philosophical, mental point of view, is that I think anybody that goes in that does think that they know everything is going to be hurting in any career. So tempering that judgment of yourself first of all, and then also the and weighing in the confidence, I think that Taylor mentioned as well, is very important, and just accepting that you're not going to know everything, and nor should you. If you have that expectation, you might be setting your goals maybe slightly unrealistically, and just think about that very in depth, in the sense that what's realistic for what you want to achieve, and then go and learn that. I think also establishing some mentorship and some people that are willing to help you. Not everybody just jumps out of their desk, willing to help you. So finding the right kind of people, doing some research in advance before you do go and talk to some technical experts or subject matter experts, as we call them, before you go burden them with their very busy jobs. At least do some of your homework and feel like you can ask the right questions, you can have a meaningful conversation with them, so that it doesn't feel like you're wasting their time. And then you don't go leaving that conversation feeling like, man, all I did was waste their time, and I also didn't get anything out of it. So having a little bit of that background, also keeping it short as possible. If you're just going for exploration around a certain set of people that have that may be like super uber smart, just starting with very short, brief conversations, like what's the best way to look into this particular subject? What would I need to go find? And then go back and ask them, instead of burdening them with an hour-long conversation of just a barrage of questions where you're not really learning necessarily, you're just asking tons of questions. So a lot of that in-depth learning comes from yourself, but using the guidance of others to try to put you into the best position possible so that when you go back to them, you're having a very meaningful, positive conversation.
BJ, you have continually talked about mentorship. How do you suggest someone pursue that or find someone that could serve as a mentor for them?
Yeah, a little bit of extroversion helps. Not all companies have a program set up for mentoring. A lot of times you have to just go and initiate it yourself, again, having some good goals around what it is you're trying to achieve in the mentorship, and then usually seeking somebody that's at least 5 to 10 years of more experience than you are. I've seeked some directors. I think Jennifer Ray was a particular mentor that you work with, Taylor, and then also I've had the good fortune of working with really high level people in the corporate business that has brought a lot of insight into to how I even change some of my views of how the company works. So sometimes it's just purely serendipitous, but other times you do have to go out and forge your own way.
Yeah, that's a really great way to put it. And remember that I always like to tell myself that people don't look for engineers because engineers have all the answers, but because engineers know how to get the answers. And a part of that it is like knowing in which doors to knock and being, people tend to like to lend their knowledge and be in this position that, oh, I'm teaching you, oh, I guess I'm smart. People like to see themselves like that. So yeah, I would definitely copy BJ and saying that don't be really afraid of, coming to someone and telling them that, asking them to mentor you, because those relationships are definitely helpful down the road. Anyone else? If you have last questions, we want to be mindful with everyone's time. So if anyone have additional questions, say now, or maybe look for us. Of course, we are always here. The Career Center is always here to help you if you have additional questions. If you want to maybe try to get in contact with Taylor and BJ to ask other questions, we're always here. But seems like no one has other last minute questions. Seems like not, right? Okay, so we want to thank everyone for tuning in. Again, we are here always looking for ways to offer relevant career advice, a career resource to our CSU students and alumni. And if you're interested in more career service, we have our website, alumni.collegestate.edu. And there you can find additional resources, additional events, and remembering that this event, the CSU Alumni Association, is putting every other Monday, so same time. So we have different people coming to talk about their career, their expertise. Again, you will ask questions. So please connect with us. And again, another big thank you to BJ and Taylor. You guys were amazing. Great words here today. Great advice. And I feel like I learned a lot too, so thank you. And thank you, Leslie, for being here with me too, and helping with this. Is a first for all of us, like doing this online event. So thanks for being patient with us. And again, any other resource that you want to learn and want to get in contact with us, alumni.collegestate.edu. And go Rams. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you guys. Go Rams.
Take care.